Welcome to the Human Meme Podcast. I'm David Bowles, and today we will be considering my new book, Beyond the Burial Tree. The full title runs longer: The Seizure of the Native Dead and the Unfinished Return, and every word on that line is carrying weight. It is a history of how the native dead of this country were taken from their graves and turned into property, and of the long effort to bring them home. I said it in one river valley I know in my body, the Loop in central Nebraska, because that valley is the homeland of the Pawnee, and because I was raised on that same ground and can answer for it. Let me start with the title, since people ask. A burial tree is an old way of keeping the dead. On the plains, a family would raise a scaffold, or use the fork of a tree and lay the body up where the wind and the sky could reach it. A burial tree kept the dead in the open on purpose, named and close, and watched over by the people who loved them until the bones went back to the earth in their own time. That is the world the title sits inside. To go beyond the burial tree, in the sense I mean it, is to be carried out of that care entirely, down off the scaffold and into a wooden drawer in a museum 2,000 miles away, fitted with a catalog number, and lost. That is what happened. And it happened on a scale most Americans have never been told. Through the 19th century and deep into the 20th, the bones of native people were collected for science. They were dug from graves and from battlefields and taken from the freshly dead, then measured, numbered, and shelved in universities, in historical societies, and in the medical collections of the Army. In 1868, the Office of the Surgeon General put out an order asking Army doctors to gather native skulls so the size of them could be studied. A grief that any family on Earth would know on sight was treated on the other side of the counter as a research opportunity. The dead became holdings. An ancestor became an object that a stranger could keep, study, and decline to return. I anchor the book in the Pawnee because their story shows you the whole machine in one place. These were a people who read their own lives in the stars. The Skidi band, the wolf people, built their earth lodges as small models of the heavens, with 4 posts for the 4 stars that hold up the corners of the sky, and they watched the Pleiades come through the smoke hole to know when to plant. A people that, careful about the order of the universe, had thought as hard as anyone alive about where a life goes when it leaves the body. And it was that people whose dead were carried off by the wagon load, and whose return a state historical society would later resist. Its director comparing a bone to a book and saying he did not believe in burning books. The dead of a people, in that one sentence, became a library. 2 conditions made it possible, and they belong underneath the whole story rather than off to the side. The first was the sheer speed of dying. Smallpox and the other imported diseases, and later the engineered mortality of removal and confinement, killed faster than any people could perform its rites. The Pawnee lost roughly half their number in the decade after they were driven south to Indian Territory. A funeral tradition built for the ordinary rhythm of loss comes apart under a flood, and the flood was the design. The second condition was the theft of the land, which was never separable from the theft of the graves. A people removed from its ground is removed from its dead. When a homesteader's plow turns new furrows, it turns them through a burial ground, and the deed that hands one family its quarter section hands it, without a word, the bones beneath. For most of American history, no law said any of this had to be undone. That changed in 1990. when Congress passed the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. For the first time, the dead could be asked for, and the institutions holding them could be made to answer. It was a real turning, and I will not pretend otherwise. A law, though, is only a beginning, and the returns since have been slow and uneven, fought for drawer by drawer and valley by valley by the descendants and the nations whose dead were taken. The Pawnee were central to that fight, and much of what the law later made national began with their refusal to let the matter rest. There is one more thread I could not leave out, because it is the same crime in a different room. The decades that filled the museum drawers also filled the boarding schools, where Native children were taken to be remade, and where many of them died far from home. This past summer, the Interior Department closed its own investigation and confirmed at least 973 children whose deaths it could document in the federal school system, spread across more than 400 schools. And the department said plainly that the true number runs far higher. Those are children who were sent away and never came back, which is the boarding school form of an ancestor dug up and never returned. The land remembers both. So the question the book finally puts is easy to say and hard to answer. What does a nation owe the people whose ancestors it dug up, and why does the work of return remain unfinished today? The book ends without a tidy verdict, on purpose. It lays the record out as carefully as I know how and lets the size of it land. I wrote this one because the ground asked for it. That valley is in my body. I know what is buried in it. And I know the country has only begun to count. Beyond the Burial Tree is out now at bowlesbooks.com, in print and as an ebook, with the audiobook on the way. If you read it slowly. These were people, named and grieved once, and the least the living can do is learn their story before deciding what we owe them. For the Human Meme Podcast, I'm David Bowles, wishing you a right evening and a brighter tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Be a human meme.